We choose to bring beauty into the world where there is none, in order to survive, to find some kind of divine order, so that we realize that there's God somewhere in this godless world. You have the basic, boring fabric of life, but then you have this, I guess, like magenta complex. Holy shit. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Heaven Sent Honey. Today, we are going to be talking about the color magenta. Now, I know there's plenty of videos on YouTube about magenta and how it's not real and how we physically, our eyes cannot perceive magenta. There's no wavelength for magenta, and that it's basically a figment of our imagination. Our brains make it up to solve the problem between the red and blue cones firing in our eyes. That alone is very intriguing for the color magenta. I'm wearing magenta / fuchsia in honor of it today. But I want to talk about magenta in terms of kind of what that means for us as people, and I kind of want to unnecessarily dig into the symbolism behind it just for fun. I have a few examples of kind of what this means. Magenta, like I said, is a figment of our imagination. We create it to solve a problem in our brain. And this is not the only time that our brain does this. In fact, it has been witnessed with Charles Bonnet syndrome, which is a syndrome where people experience hallucinations in daily life, as well as whenever they are born blind, or if they have had blindness later in life, or when people have migraines and they have a scotoma, which is a portion of your vision that is blocked out. And they experience hallucinations in those, either in their blindness or in their partial blindness, which is very interesting. There is one neuroscientist, I believe, his name is Dr. Ramachandran. He is very easy to read, very easy to understand. He makes very complex concepts understandable for someone like me who is not a neuroscientist or anything like that. But I do find neuroscience very interesting, specifically in the case of magenta, in the case of phantom limbs, things that the brain is perceiving that isn't really there or isn't really happening. And so Dr. Ramachandran talks about a man whose name was James Thurber, and he had these hallucinations in one of his eyes because of a childhood injury. He was blind in, I believe, his right eye, and he sees things like bunnies and all kinds of crazy hallucinations of things that are not really there. This is what's called, or what Dr. Ramachandran calls, filling in. It's a very loose term apparently, but basically your brain is so smart. It's really, maybe not smart, I'd say it's very efficient, and it takes your past memories. I don't think this is the case for someone who is blind their whole life and receives these hallucinations, but in terms of people like us, in terms of the color magenta for people who can see, and people who have had blindness later in their life, or people who have partial blindness, our brain takes our past memories and kind of helps us to construct whatever is missing here, and whatever's missing in this scotoma or your field of view or even in the color spectrum, and it tries to fit it into some kind of perceived structure that we already have of the world. This is the case in if you're having an argument with somebody and they just can't seem to understand your perspective, is because there are people who literally cannot perceive something outside of their constructed reality, right? So that's the case for magenta, that's the case for people who are having arguments, and that is the case for Charles Bonnet syndrome and for James Thurber. And it's even the case for normal people. It's called our blind spot. Whenever you look at, let's say, a pointed dot, I can put a diagram here from Dr. Ramachandran's book. It's called Phantoms in the Brain. Oh, you gotta read it. It's so good, easy to read. easy to understand, fascinating. So all the weird, crazy shit that happens in your brain is in this book. But, so this happens with our blind spot. If you look at the diagram, this just blows my mind. It's just a regular wheel, and then you have this little, this shaded area in the middle. And when you cover your right eye and you turn your head so that your blind spot is over top of this wheel, your brain, you'll notice after like maybe 2 or 3 seconds, will fill it in, and it will have the lines converge in the middle instead of have that blank space there, which means that your brain is trying to fill in or fix what it sees so that we can, I guess, survive. I don't know if maybe this is a survival mechanism, so that your periphery is helping you to maybe detect predators that you can like feel are there, but you don't see them. I don't know how we evolved this, but it is a mixture of what happens in your eyes and also what happens in your brain. I'm not going to get too scientific with it, but it's basically your brain is making something up, but it's like an educated guess. Your brain is using its past knowledge on how the world works, how things function, what it's seen in the past, the knowledge that it has gathered over the years of you being alive, and it constructs an educated guess on what this blind spot is. Or in people who have more active imaginations or who have Charles Bonnet syndrome, your brain's imagination is overactive and it produces hallucinations. And there's this kind of barrier between your brain and your eyes that people with Charles Bonnet syndrome do not have, where your brain, for normal people, you close your eyes, when you imagine something, you don't literally imagine it right in front of you, you just think of it. Our brain has this kind of barrier that stops us from literally, if I think of a butterfly, I'm not going to literally envision it in front of me, it's in my head. People with Charles Bonnet syndrome don't have that barrier. Anyway, this goes into something even more interesting. There is a book, it's called The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene, and he has the sexual archetypes, which I will do a series on because I really find them interesting. One of the archetypes is the star, and the best way to describe a star sexual archetype is somebody who you see in the distance, that you don't really have never talked to. Let's say stars, for example, are celebrities, right? We see them all the time, they're beautiful, they're glamorous, but we don't really know anything about them. And that mystery, the fact that we don't know those little peculiarities about them or their lifestyle, and why media outlets are always trying to figure it out, is because we don't know. And that's what makes them alluring, is that mystery, the fact that we don't know who they are, what their wants and desires are, what their philosophies are on the world. And that's the power that the star holds. And so you have to imagine the star as this concept, and then it's like our blind spot. You have this dot, and then the rest you fill in with your imagination. If you've ever done this, I'm sure, whenever you really like somebody but you don't have the guts to come up to them and talk to them, but you're like obsessed with them, you're like, this person's so beautiful, or they seem so cool, but you don't have the courage to come up to them and talk to them and get to know them, or you don't have the time, you start thinking up these personas and these things about them. And what's interesting about this, it's this kind of filling in, where you have this concept of who this person is, this idea, and then you fill in with positive information that is usually suited to you. It's usually past influences and memories that you have, and your likes and dislikes, you start filling that in, which is very interesting, because I've done this, I'm sure everybody has, where you see like a cute guy or a cute girl, you know their name, you know what they look like, but you don't know who they are. So you start kind of like thinking like, maybe they do that, maybe they do this, like maybe they're into that. You start seeing little details of their life, and you start piecing together what you think their personality is like. You start filling in. So that's kind of the beauty of Magenta, is that Magenta is this idea that we have this whole world in our brain in which we conceptualize things, and we even make things up in order to To survive, I'd say beauty definitely falls into this category, creating beauty out of nothing. We choose to bring beauty into the world where there is none in order to survive, to find some kind of divine order so that we realize that there's God somewhere in this godless world. I think it is all survival in a way. And there is, out of this survival, out of this kind of this strange trick that your brain performs, you have beauty in this world, you have mystery, you have allure, you have eroticism, you have the exotic. We create everything. You have the basic, boring fabric of life, but then you have this, I guess, like magenta complex. Holy shit. Where you create beauty out of nothing. And you fill in all the ugly holes. Whether it's a person, whether it's the fact that magenta doesn't exist, or whether it's seeing a bunny in the periphery of your eye that isn't really there. Whatever it is, magenta's a pretty cool concept to talk about. So that's pretty much it. Just thought I'd bring a new kind of idea about magenta into the world, because you keep hearing the scientific part. We all understand magenta doesn't exist and that it's a figment of our imagination, but I bet you could write a whole book on what like magenta means, what it symbolizes and all that. So I'm here to bring that, to manifest that into the world. So yeah, the magenta complex. That's what this video is going to be called. Alright, let me know if you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you think that this whole idea of magenta being a lie is bullshit, because we can see it. Let me know if you think that this whole philosophy behind magenta is interesting and the symbolism behind it. I don't know, let me know how you feel if you want to talk. Have a great rest of your day or evening, and I will see you again. Goodbye.